Good evening, everyone. A year is the period of time it takes the Earth to complete a trip around the sun. There's 365 days, 5 hours, 48 minutes, 45, and 5,100 seconds. But a year is also a long chapter in the lives of people, and it's a period in which those lives are profoundly influenced by chance, design, and circumstance. And these were the circumstances and events of 1957 that will be most remembered by Oklahomans.
Story 57, a review of the year's biggest news stories in Oklahoma. Filmed, written, and produced at the WKY-TV News Bureau. And now, news director, Bob Gamble.
At WKY, there are 15 people whose only job is to keep you informed as to what goes on in the world and in the state. In a year's time from this area, we will have reported to you 1,300 times. Over 31,000 hours of labor are represented in those reports. By television, you were able to see and hear over 20,000 news stories last year, over 3,000 of those stories on film. From our 1,300 reports of 1957, these stories were the most significant. The year 1957 began as 56 ended, in a swirl of dust. The dust blew in the day, and in the nighttime, everything was dusty. The farmer said he needed rain. The land was dry, and the grain was poor. To turn a field was to only plow up another dust storm. Oklahoma was in the grip of the worst drought in history. The dust and the havoc it wrought began to attract national attention. Local attention focused on the need for city water supplies. Then the moisture came. On a cold Saturday morning in March, the snow began, and the panhandle of Oklahoma disappeared behind a wall of white. 2 WKY reporters headed for the blizzard area. Along the way, victims of the storm. At each car, the newsmen checked for stranded and injured. The wind and snow offered no mercy. Most were safe at home, but locked in by the storm. Others would have to take their chances with no shelter close by. Just outside of Knowles, the news truck plowed through its last snowdrift and stopped. One at a time, they went in different directions in search of shelter. On the third trip out, a grocery store cafe was found. Although close to the truck, it had been obscured by the storm. Inside were other motorists who had found the same refuge. With nothing to do, most watched the storm. Some rested, others talked. When the snow plow came, the men went to work. And although the snow was still blowing, there were people missing. When the snow plows moved, they freed the news vehicle, and we went with them. Nighttime did not bring an end to the search. Some parts of the road were blown clear by the wind, but others held giant barriers of white. Inside the plow, the driver would speed up, and we tried to smash through the wall of packed snow. Slowly but surely, the plows would move the wall. The next morning it was cloudy, but the wind had died somewhat. It had stopped snowing, and the weatherman said that skies would clear. Some roads were open in the embattled area of the blizzard, but many farm roads made other means necessary. Those who had been stranded in the storm began to clear the snow from their vehicles and go on their way, while others would have to wait for the plows. Snowplows cleared a long stretch of road in the Panhandle for use as a landing field, and another team of our reporters, left by plane, to look for our ground newsmen and try and get film of the disaster back to the city for use on the news. When the news truck was contacted, the plane was set down. After only a few minutes' exchange of information, the film was rushed home. Every phase of the blizzard operation was covered. The National Guard plane flew over the area, dropping medical supplies to stranded motorists, farmers, and cities. Down below, the farmer was surveying the damage wrought by the sudden storm that gave no chance to domestic or wild animals. Some were frozen in their tracks. Those that weathered the storm were rounded up and divided, having mixed when fences were made into bridges by the drifts. Those that fell would have to be left, and the cows would have to be milked. And to help the sun, the snow would have to be shoveled out of the way, and the farmer cleared away the snow to do the chores. Although the weekend blizzard caused untold hardship, it left some moisture, but before long, the ground was dry again. Then, as if a miracle had been performed, it began to rain. This was good for the soil. The city businessman was happy. Now business would be better. The farmer was glad and waited for it to end. It did not end. The rains continued to fall. On the morning of May 16th, people awakened to hear an appeal over WKY for persons with fishing boats go to Dover. The boats were sent. The boats were there for the rescue. The rescue was soon enough, and hundreds of Dover residents were saved, but only with their hats on.
Out of my house, when you come up here, the boys came down there with the boat.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, about 11 o'clock at night. Said, you better come on out. They said, they say it's going to be big in a little bit. And I just got in the house and waiting out there after my hog, see. And I just got my clothes changed and took a bath, you see. And they was up there, everything was going good to me. I didn't think it was going to get high enough to hurt me, see. So when they hollered and said, come on, well, we just grabbed their hat, and that's all I got till I went back today.
Yeah. Did you lose anything in that house? Anything gone?
Well, I don't know yet. I couldn't see if the water's this deep out there, but my lot. Yes, there's lots of fences gone and stuff like that, you know, and barrels. Yeah, I lost one case of oil.
Lose any livestock?
Well, I don't know. I got 23 gone.
23 what?
Hogs.
23 hogs.
They're gone, but I don't know whether I lost them or not. Now, the boys said they thought they saw 3 or 4 pigs across the road over there, and then they saw some down the road on the highway 81.
You might be able to gather up.
Oh, yes, I might be able to get some of that back, but I don't know positively what.
How long is it going to be before you're going to get back in the house?
Oh, I tell you, with that gas tank off like that, it's broke off. You see, my gas tank's turned bottom side upwards. It may be a week or 6 months for it.
Only from the air could the extent of the flood be seen. Below, the Cimarron, filled from bank to bank, had shed its burden across the farmlands. The rain that the land had prayed for became Oklahoma's third plague in 1957. Railroad lines were washed out. Bridges became broken lines of communication. Roads were inundated. But in many cases, the roads were no longer needed. Agriculture again came to a standstill. And when the water receded, the roads, the bridges, the railroads, and the livestock had gone downstream. Only the mud remained behind with the flood victims. Dover was behind. The Cimarron rolled on. It would have ended, but the rain continued, and tributaries such as Skeleton Creek backed up. This is Enid, one of Oklahoma's larger towns. The Boggy Creek runs through town. In May, it ran rampant. This was the worst flood in Enid history, with damage running over $2 million. On down the river, Guthrie waited, and then waited no longer, and the flood alarm was turned in.
9 Fire Department. Well, go ahead and turn the whistle loose. It's 1 foot and 4 inches.
How many times?
5 times. Foot and 4 inches here, the flood stage on this gauge, but it's coming out in the low bottom down here, so we're turning the whistle loose now, and I expect it to get up over this here before it's done.
Giving plenty of people plenty of time to get out.
We're giving them plenty of warning this time to get out.
They left, but the water came no higher, and only a few were affected. The Cimarron forced many small towns to flee, and soon made it obvious that the next disaster would be where the Cimarron gathered with the Arkansas. With both at flood stage, the crest of the river would hit a major metropolis. Tulsa would be next in nature's vent of fury. But Tulsa did not wait for the water to invade its homes, factories, and streets. In one great human effort, Tulsa rebelled, decided to fight the river. In the Riverside and Brookline districts, hundreds of vans moved in to help evacuate those that might be flooded. Construction company dump trucks with police escorts screamed in defiance as they raced to the riverside with sand. Volunteers, many still dressed in their business clothes, pushed forward to lend a hand. Governor Gary left the Capitol by air for a personal look at the threat. And when he returned, he ordered the National Guard into action. And more help piled into Tulsa to help fight the rising river. Small boys and big men plugged the dike together. And then Tulsa rested and waited for the flood crest. They waited with a 45-block-long dike at their feet, a dike of sandbags, and the water rose. The dike held, and after this effective defense, the Cimarron was conquered. Bixby, near Tulsa, suffered, but not as much as had been expected. In the southern half of the state, another flood. At Paul's Valley, the Washita River flooded low areas. At Waurika, the Cow and Beaver Creeks swept from their banks, and 300 fled their homes. Observers said it was a bad flood, but not the worst they had experienced. When the flood had run its course, it left behind in Oklahoma a total of some $35 million in damage. Another threat came with the spring rains, the annual tornado season. First hit this spring was Holdenville, but although the twister bounced along Main Street, no one was hurt. 1 month later, a twister struck during the evening near Lawton and swept away 2 farm homes and the 4 people who were inside. The same night, a funnel dipped into 2 communities in Pottawatomie County and did damage, but took no lives. All spring, tornadoes threatened, and a record number of funnels were seen. The major storm was a freak. In January, a twister struck both at Warner in Muskogee County and Gans in Sequoia County. In less than 1 minute, 8 lives were claimed by a funnel of wind that struck in the early morning without warning, as so often happens. In those matters where Oklahomans controlled their own destiny, a storm also raged. It centered around a seat in the Oklahoma legislature, which began its biennial session with deceptive calm.
Look out, John.
At the last blow of the gavel on the 8th day of 1957, the 26th Oklahoma legislature began a 5-month lawmaking grind, which veteran reporters described as being strangely devoid of most of the horseplay which has marked past sessions. The lawmakers went right to work on 2 big problems: finding money for higher teacher salaries and an expanded highway construction program. The serious mood might be attributed to the cloud under which the 26th legislature began, a cloud from which Tom Paine of Okmulgee emerged as a state senator with a sigh of relief. It was a long, hard fight for Paine. He lost the election to Senator John Russell on the basis of absentee ballots, even after a recount. A special election was ordered and Payne won. The state senate, after thinking hard, voted to seat Payne. Russell was out. But only a few days later, Russell had his day and Wagner seen at the preceding summer's vote scandals. The charge was conspiracy to defraud the state. The judge, Glenn O. Morris of Oklahoma City. The star witness, Bob Jeffrey, a key supporter of Russell's in the ill-fated political campaign. Jeffrey established the plot to pay Russell campaign workers with state emergency relief checks, and convincingly, in these words.
Yes, sir, I called Frank Easley the morning of the 23rd.
I tell this jury what you talked to him.
And I said, Frank, will the money be here? Now, I want to know yes or no, and if it's not going to be, I'm going to borrow it, go to the bank and borrow it. And he said, Bob, it'll be on schedule.
All right, so what happened? Just go ahead and tell us. After you talked to Mr. Easley, what happened on the 23rd day of July in reference to this campaign?
Mr. Cannon and I had a lot of visitors on the 23rd day of July. Mr. Easley arrived at my office sometime between the hour of 3 and 4 o'clock.
Mr. Easley?
I mean, Mr. Johnson. And he had some checks.
What kind of checks?
Emergency relief checks.
How many checks did he have?
I do not know.
What did he do with the checks?
He gave them to me. I turned to my secretary and I said, alphabetize these things, get on the outside of the office, let them in one at a time, and let's get the show on the road.
For the jury, it was a difficult decision. For the better part of a week, testimony filled the Wagner County courtroom to the effect that political support had been purchased with state money. But beyond reasonable doubt, who was responsible?
You went to Oklahoma City on the 6th?
Yes, sir.
You stayed all night at the Billmore Hotel?
Yes, sir.
And on August the 7th, you again called Mr. Easley from the Democratic headquarters
Yes, sir.
in Oklahoma City and talked about and asked him if he had destroyed those other applications he told you he had.
Yes, sir. That's right.
Was John Russell present when you made that call?
No, sir.
Did John Russell know that you were going to make such a call?
No, sir.
No doubt that a conspiracy to involve state funds existed. Russell was represented by Fred Green of Salisaw. Then the case went to the final argument stage.
They admitted that we proved from every witness on the witness stand that John Russell didn't know anything about it. Their witnesses, not ours. Their witnesses. But he said he must have known. The court has told you in the instructions in this case that the burden of proving John Russell guilty rests on the state. He don't tell you that John Russell has got to prove himself innocent. The court don't tell you that John Russell is presumed to be guilty and he's got to prove himself innocent. The court tells you that John Russell is presumed to be innocent until they prove him guilty, and each one of you gentlemen separately say.
The issues had been drawn. The jury retired. Not until the next day would the verdict be known. For everyone, anxious waiting. For Senator Russell and his wife, for Judge Morris, for prosecutors Max Findley and Joe Cannon, and the spectators. The jury could not reach a verdict and had to be discharged. Russell exploded at the indecision.
I'm the only one to come in here and talk, Your Honor, and trying to back get me a speedy trial, and I'm entitled to it unconstitutional. I don't want to wait too long. I appreciate it. First time I've been mad, Your Honor, in 7 months. I'm mad.
There was no need for the outburst. The Wagner charges were dropped. Several months later, a similar charge in Oklahoma County was dismissed. Senator Russell, eased out of politics, now practices law in Wagner. Bob Jeffrey later pleaded guilty on 2 conspiracy counts and was fined $1,250. Former Emergency Relief Board Administrator Frank Easley, who was ousted right after the scandal, pleaded guilty to conspiracy in Oklahoma County and was fined $750. Charges against 2 other principals were dismissed. But the entire Democratic Party smarted under the scandal. At the annual Gridiron Banquet, state newsmen unveiled a new dirge for party use called Wagoner Deals. After the legislature adjourned early in June, the people were asked to pass a new law, county option. A hot debate between the United Dries and the beer industry raged right up until the moment the voters decided for themselves in favor of things as they were. But United Dry leader Dr. Stanley Niles said his people were not discouraged by the vote.
They feel they've lost a skirmish and not a battle.
The repeal leaders, like Richard Wilson, found new hope in the outcome.
We intend to circulate a petition as soon as we have our educational program underway. It is going to require a tremendous amount of research and a series of articles for the public.
When will we vote on repeal? How long will it take?
It will take us at least a year.
Just across the state border in Arkansas this fall, Little Rock Central High School erupted into the headlines. Oklahoma was winning national recognition for its calm school integration program, while President Eisenhower ordered federal troops into Little Rock to enforce the Supreme Court integration order. Oklahoma held its breath while the controversy raged just across the state border, but the flames did not spread. The sight of a stagecoach rolling past a building which housed a modern atomic reactor set the stage for the biggest show of the year in Oklahoma, the Semi-Centennial Exposition. The fabulous first 50 years of statehood were depicted in hundreds of displays, exhibits, and pageants, which attracted approximately 1.5 million visitors. One of the most crowded spots was the Russian exhibit. These were still pre-Sputnik days, and nowhere among the hand-carved vases, the fine fabrics, and the television sets, which cost too much, could Oklahomans find a hint of what was to come, and we could afford to be condescending. But looking back on it, maybe this Soviet salesman knew what was coming. American science was represented by this atomic reactor, other models of which were ordered for both Oklahoma University and Oklahoma State University. But this year, the collegiate scene in Oklahoma was still dominated by the exploits of the Big Red of OU. The year began with the presentation of the O'Donnell Trophy, emblematic of national football supremacy. But Coach Wilkinson insisted it couldn't last. And the fantastic string finally did end at Owen Field, November 16th. But Sooners like Buddy Ujewski knew how to lose, too.
What happens now, as far as you feel, as far as the team's concerned?
Oh, we're just going to go out and forget about it and look forward to next Saturday.
Thanks a lot, Joe.
You bet, sir.
One of the Sooners' biggest fans stepped from his famous plane, the Columbine, into a brisk November wind. In Oklahoma City, for the first of his planned series of speeches on science and preparedness, the president opened his nationwide radio and television address with some words of praise for the mighty Sooners, and later also complimented Oklahoma's Frontiers of Science Foundation. Oklahoma and the rest of the nation had entered the age of the Sputnik and was racing to catch up. But as the president's bubble-top limousine rolled toward downtown Oklahoma City, Oklahomans were racing to see the president. The very young and those just a little bit older all scrambled for a look at the president who had come to tell the nation what would be necessary to keep abreast of the Russians in the frightening missile era. Violent acts against society or against property, whether by plot or by accident, were numerous in 1957. The Aero Commander plant at Bethany burned in August. Damage was over $1 million. November 26th, the group of connected buildings burned at the Oklahoma City Livestock Exchange. That same night, another blaze destroyed a feed building about a mile away. 800 tons of alfalfa hay went up in smoke. Arson was suspected, but couldn't be proved. The next day, a 2-alarm blaze at a farm store and tavern in Britain. A 17-year-old boy admitted setting this fire and implicated a companion. The boy said he was just looking for excitement. An oil well near Velma caught fire in October, and Red Adair of Houston put it out in 2 days. Narcotics occupied the time of state, federal, and Oklahoma City officers last year. 2 big raids, one last spring and another this fall, netted over 40 suspected users and pushers of dope. Heroin, marijuana, and other drugs were seized. In some instances, sales had been made to federal agents, and when these cases reached federal court, sentences of 50 years and more were not unusual. Oklahoma City's narcotics problem was less of a problem than ever before. Orville Lindsay Chambliss was found. Victim of a gang slaying, his body was discovered in a shallow grave near Oklahoma City. At 9:15 on the morning of October 16th, 2 men held up the First National Bank in Maud, and in less than a month, banks in Hera and Commerce had also been robbed. More than $35,000 was taken, but the brief crime spree proved unprofitable. Following arrests in Oklahoma, Washington, and Fort Worth, 5 men were behind bars, and 3 had pleaded guilty. The year 1957 wasn't entirely grim, however. 1957 produced some laughs, too, although the subject matter in a couple of them was just a little bit violent. Remember that famous bullfight near the Oklahoma City stockyards? A reluctant packing plant customer upended stockman Arthur Perry twice in a row. Then there was the thorny dilemma of 14-year-old Roy Pebworth, who stumbled into a cactus plant while, in his words, horsing around after school. Worthy New Year's resolutions give a wide berth to both bulls and cactus. It all happened in 1957, a long but interesting chapter in the lives of many. In a few days, the Earth will again begin the trip around the sun, a trip that will last a year, and we hope that the new year for you is filled to the brim with happiness, good health, and prosperity. Staff photographers whose film was shown on tonight's program: Scott Berner, Larry Gaffney, Cliff Adkins, and Bob Grant. Film editors and writers: Ernie Schultz and Charlie Parker. Thank you, and good evening.
Inventory 57, a review of the year's biggest news stories in Oklahoma. Filmed, written, and produced by the WKY-TV News Bureau. Your narrator, Bob Gamble.